the freedom of workers to decide whether or not they want to join a union. And these are folks who have worked in various states and have a lot of expertise on that. Everything from those who've worked directly with workers like yourselves, as well as attorneys who have policy expertise on this issue. We also have Mr. Mark Janus, who most of you know was a plaintiff for the with a lawsuit that went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court and really changed the nature of the worker freedom issue. And so we're going to start by watching a video about Mr. Janus, and then we're going to proceed into the program. So, oh, yeah, lights, all of them?
Please. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Mark Janus. I live in Springfield, Illinois. I work for the Department of Health Care and Family Services, and I'm the lead plaintiff in Janus versus AFSCME. You know, I would say I'm just an average guy. I'm a middle-class person that goes to work every day, enjoys my activities, got my kids that I love dearly, and I would like to see the state come back and be the powerhouse that it could be and that it used to be. Quite frankly, I don't think it's really sunk in quite yet. The ramifications of this case, everybody tells me it has national implications, but I don't look at it that way. I just look at it as an average guy kind of standing up for his own rights of free speech. Yes, it'll have national repercussions, but I don't look at it that I'm anybody special or anybody, extraordinary. I work for Healthcare and Family Services, and I'm forced to pay money to a union that then supports political causes that I don't agree with. I learned about public service when I got into the scouting as a Cub Scout and moved my way through all the way up to Eagle Scout. And it teaches you self-reliance, but it also teaches you that you have to become a part of the community. And you have to try to better yourself and better the community as you go along and perform public service. I'd kind of like to have my money go, instead of going to the union and their causes, go more towards more civic help, such as Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts. And there's so many causes that need help and assistance all across the state. We cannot continue down this path that we currently have because it's not helping.
We're going to have a couple different panels tonight, and we'll have the opportunity for questions as well with each of those. So we're going to start with Mr. Janus and Vinnie Vernuccio. So Mr. Janus, you heard his introduction. Vinnie Vernuccio is a labor attorney and labor policy fellow with the Mackinac Center, as well as the Project Workers for Opportunity, which is part of the Mackinac Center. And he's also with the Institute for American Worker. And then Jarrett Skorup is going to join us as well, and Jarrett is the Vice President of Communications and Marketing with the Mackinac Center as well. So coming up, and I'll let you guys discuss this issue for the next half hour.
Cool, thanks Stephanie.
Thanks.
Thank you all for coming out.
We'll awkwardly stand up here and talk to you. I'll kind of just moderate between the guys. I think we're fine. If you do have questions and we need to clarify something that we say as we go, that's no problem from us. So I'm at the Mackinac Center, which is a think tank in Michigan. So Michigan became a right-to-work state 10 years ago, and that was one of the first issues I kind of worked on, which is generally speaking, about half the states are what we call right-to-work states, half are not. And that's where, in the right-to-work state, very simple law, you can't be forced to pay dues or fees to a union in order to work. In the other half of the states, if you're under a collective bargaining agreement, you have to pay dues or fees. So that changed with the Janus decision for public sector workers. And so one of my jobs was doing research on the issue of right to work. That's why I'm here, happy to talk about that. But I want to start with Mark. We got a little bit of the intro in the video, but can you talk about what your job was, what you're required to do, and then what the case was about?
Yeah, I worked for the state of Illinois as a child support specialist, and when I did my introduction, as new employees go through, you're signing all kinds of paperwork, and nothing was ever told me about a union. Nothing was ever put in front of me that I was part of a bargaining unit. There was basically, that part was silent. And I didn't learn about the union until I got my first paycheck, and there was a deduction right along with, taxes and, the health care and pension that said that I owed union dues, and there was a dollar amount. And I said, well, how can this be if I never signed up to join the union? And I learned from talking to a number of other employees that the state legislature mandated, at the behest of the public sector unions, that if you were not a union member, you still had to pay an agency fee. And because that was supposedly to go towards strictly wages and contract negotiation. Well, I found it very interesting that the agency fee that I had to pay was close to 80% of what the cost of a full union dues membership was. And I found that if all they're negotiating for is wages and benefits, I would have thought that the amount would have been lower. But progressing forward a few years, the AFSCME union in Illinois at the time was promoting all kinds of policies and all kinds of other things that I just did not agree with. They were endorsing candidates without any kind of a forum for the employees or the members to say whether they liked or did not like the candidate they were endorsing. They also were in the legislature lobbying for different things, and one of the things they were lobbying for was an increase in income tax, because the state of Illinois has an income tax. And the first thing that I'm thinking is, okay, the members of the union are also taxpayers. Why would they be advocating their membership to have to pay more taxes? I know Alaska has a totally different tax structure than Illinois, but I don't know of anybody that loves to pay taxes and the like. So these were just some of the items that I just did not agree with, and the fact that it was just done without any input from the members. It was all done at the administrative level or the union official level. And I didn't think that was right, because I thought we were a democracy or a republic, and we all should have a vote. Well, fast forward a few years, and I learned that a friend of mine knew how upset I was with all of this, and he put me in contact with a lady at Illinois Policy, and she said, there are some some federal cases coming in that I think we're looking for a plaintiff, and are you interested? And I said, of course I would, because with my previous public service in Scouts and through my church and other things, I kind of felt that, I had to do something to kind of right what I thought was wrong, and from the one-sided approach that seemed to be there. Well, we went to the federal court in Chicago, and we lost. And I thought, okay, well, this case is over. But they said, no, we're going to take this to the appellate level.
Let me introduce you to the legal system.
Yeah, legal system, exactly. And so I went to the arguments with the appellate court, and there's 3 judges on a panel, and we lost there also. And I'm thinking, okay, we're done. This case is over. And they said, no, we're going to take this to the Supreme Court. And I said, the Supreme Court, like in Washington? And they said, yeah, that's our next step. That's what we're going to do. And of course, you can only imagine, the fact that this case may or not be called by the Supreme Court, and because only about 3% of the cases that the court will consider do they actually take and decide and make a decision on. Well, we did go to the, one of the justices will interrupt the attorney and ask a question, and then the attorney has to answer. So it's more like what I used to do in high school, which was debate club. It's more of a debate back and forth. And that goes for both sides, both the pros and the cons. Well, at the end of the oral arguments, I still kind of didn't really know which direction they were leaning. We kind of thought there was some clues that they were leaning in my direction, but we weren't 100% sure. And it wasn't until the decision actually came down on the very last day of the court session on June 27th of 18 did we learn that they ruled in my favor, which gave public sector employees or government employees the right to work and gave them the choice and the voice as to whether they wanted to join a union or not. Now, obviously, immediately after all of that, you know, I was slammed in the press, I was slammed by the unions that I was trying to put them out of business, and it was going to be the demise of unions across the country, et cetera, et cetera. And you can only imagine the amount of vile that came my direction. And, you know, I never said in any correspondence or any comment that I ever made that I wanted to put a union out of business. Never said that, although they claimed I did. Number two, all I'm saying is that if you are a public sector employee or a government employee, you have the right to make your own decision. If you want to join the union, that's fine. That's great. If you don't want to join, that's fine and great too. But you ought to have that choice. You shouldn't have to be forced into something that you don't want. And we find across the country today, you know, that people make choices every day. And that's what is enshrined in our Constitution. And that's why in the Bill of Rights, the rights of free speech, the rights of association, the rights of free press is the very first amendment in the Constitution of the Bill of Rights. And I think that's why our forefathers put it there, because they said and enshrined it, saying that is one of the most important rights that we have in this country. And that's all I believe in and the like. So that's kind of my story, and that's where you know, what led up to what we have now, which is the ability for individuals to make their own decision. And that's all it is, period. Nothing more, nothing less.
So Vinnie, from the legal side, can you tell us, so what did the court actually find, and what's the kind of practical purposes of that for public employees?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, John. Hey, thanks for everybody for coming out. It's great to be here. Bethany, thanks again for you and Alaska Policy Forum for hosting. So in Mark's case, essentially what the court said is that everything that government unions do or public employee unions do is political. And because it's political, public employees like Mark have a First Amendment right to choose whether or not to pay a union. So in Mark's case in Illinois and then 23 other states at the time, public employees and private sector employees could be forced to pay a union whether they wanted to or not. The union literally could go to their employer and say, unless you pay us, that person has to be let go. So essentially, it was right to work, and right to work means that a union can get a worker fired for not paying them. What the Supreme Court said is that because it's political, and it's not just political as far as, okay, we're giving to a candidate, or we're doing issue advocacy, or we're paying for ballot, for or against a ballot proposal, that because they're negotiating, if they're negotiating things like a pay raise, what is that? That comes from taxpayer dollars. If they're negotiating for when the school day starts or ends, what is that? Public policy. So all of that is actually a political question. And because it's a political question, the Supreme Court said, okay, all public employees have the right to choose. And essentially, instead of having to pay 70, 80+% of agency fees like Mark was paying, they have the choice to be a full union member, pay full dues to the union, or not. And say, well, the union, it's not representing my values, or I don't support, I don't support what they're standing for, and I don't want to pay. And then, we've seen workers, public employees from across the country decide, yeah, the union's doing a good job, I'm going to continue to pay, or no, they're not. I don't want to pay for representation that I don't feel is worth it. And they've opted out, and now across the country, whether it's here in Alaska, Illinois, California, New York, those public employees have that ability to choose, and that's essentially the heart of what the Janus versus AFSCME case held.
Yeah, and the key for what Vinnie said is that decision, the Supreme Court separated government workers from private sector.
Right.
because the government that's who has to abide by Constitution. A new thing, and they kind of split the baby on the issue, because they said, okay, you can't technically force someone to be a member, but you can force them to pay these fees. And then so ultimately, to Vinnie's point, they said you could kind of get out of the direct political spending, but that all parts of bargaining are political. And I'm not using that in a denigrating way. I mean, politics is an important thing, but the key point being that even if the union is working on bargaining issues, so one of my really good friends, who's a public school teacher, he wanted to go from one school district to another school district, and he told me actually just a couple weeks ago. So the union contract said, here's your steps. You know, you have these step increases that you get as part of your union contract. And he had 12 years of teaching experience. He wanted to move closer to the town where we live, and so he's negotiating with the school district, and he said, well, I've got 12 years in, can I be on step 12? And they said, we want to do that, we need you, you're a high need area, but the union contract doesn't allow it. You can only go up to, like, for him, like step 5. And so the union wanted him to be a member, and he said, look, if you can get me up to the step where my seniority has been, then I'll join the union. But if you can't, then I don't want to. And they said, well, we can't do that, it would cause all these problems, people would be mad that are currently here. And he said, okay, well, I don't want to join. Now, you can agree or disagree with kind of the seniority and the step system, but the point of the court is that that is a political decision. You're using taxpayer dollars to determine a salary structure, which is inherently political, and you can't force someone like my friend to pay for something that is against, you know, what he believes in. So not even talking about like the candidate spending and things like that. Mark, can you talk about what was the response that you got? I mean, were the union members giving you high fives in the hallway once this kind of went through? What was your response from fellow employees and the country?
It was surprising, because I pretty much thought I was pretty much 100% alone. But as soon as the decision came out and I went back to work, I had an awful lot of people that came up to me and thanked me for what I did, because they believed the same way I did, but they didn't know what to do about it, and they didn't know what steps to take. And I also received a lot of vile from the union and those members, in subtle ways, some of them not so subtle. And for example, it still is going on today that I got a message on my Facebook Messenger of a guy that's slamming me to this day, 5 years later. And, you know, it hasn't been easy. And the point that I always try to make, and I don't seem to understand, at least in my mind and the common sense part of it, is unions portray themselves as very benevolent, hardworking, we're here for you, and they're trying to do what's best for their membership. But here's the question. If they have that type of business plan, or whatever you want to call it, why is it when somebody wants to opt out, they make it hard? They don't give people their rights to know about what they can and can't do. And why do they put up roadblocks to keep people in the union? I would think if they had a product that was so good, people would flock and join voluntarily and would want to become a part of that organization. How many people are a member of like a YMCA or some other organization, NRA, whatever it might happen to be? Why are you a member of that organization? Because you want to be, and they offer something for you that you enjoy. It's very simple. It's not rocket science. And again, the only reason that I put forth my case was because I was trapped in an organization that I didn't agree with and I didn't want to support. That's all. Because of their policies and their politics. If they had gotten out of politics and had strictly done wage and benefit negotiations, I wouldn't have filed the case. But we have many of the public sector unions that go so far beyond that are so far down the road from their original purpose that was started back in the 1930s that it makes it difficult to support them anymore.
So, Vinnie, why don't you tell us what's happened in the 5 years since the Janus decision at the state level, and what's happened here in Alaska? I know there's a lot of things caught up in the courts, but maybe a summary on that, and then we'll just take a couple questions before we move on to the next group.
Yeah, absolutely. So both pro-worker and I guess pro-big labor, pro-union policies and laws have passed across the country. I guess I'll start with some of the ones that are, more in the left-leaning states. We've seen states like California pass bills to lock workers like Mark into paying. They have a thing called windows. So a lot of these laws, and especially several union contracts, have a specific period of time when workers can exercise their First Amendment rights. I think those are illegal, but essentially, they say that you have, 10 days, and they can vary between worker things where union dues are given a tax break or something like that. So that's kind of on the left-leaning side. On the right-leaning side, we have Indiana, which passed a law saying that it wasn't just right to work that the Supreme Court said in Mark's case. It said that employees have to give what they called evidence of affirmative consent, or essentially they have to opt in, and they have to do it knowingly, so they have to be informed of their rights. So Indiana passed a law saying that workers, public employees have to be informed of their rights, they should be able to get out at any time, and that every year, essentially it's a First Amendment, it's a constitutional right which can expire, that essentially just like you re-up for your health insurance, open enrollment, other things like that, re-up into the union. So Indiana passed that as a law. Here in Alaska, actually, your former Attorney General, General Clarkson, and Governor Dunleavy, Clarkson issued an Attorney General opinion, and Dunleavy issued an administrative order saying the same thing. And that has been working its way through the court system, and now stands, if the Attorney General chooses to be appealed to the Supreme Court. So we could get the Janus Part 2 case of saying, yes, we really meant it for that opt-in, for that evidence of affirmative consent, for making sure that public employees are informed of their rights. So that's kind of the spectrum. We're seeing states like Tennessee go further to respect the secret ballot in union organizing elections, essentially saying that if a private company wants to take state incentives, they have to guarantee the private vote of workers if a union is trying to organize them. And then we've seen other states say that, well, we just shouldn't be in the business of collecting public sector union dues anyway, and they do what's known as a dues checkoff prohibition, as opposed to taking union dues directly from a public employee's paycheck. Probably the biggest one this year is the state of Florida, which did that paycheck protection that I was just talking about, but actually went further, made sure that public employees are aware of their rights before they opt into paying a union, but also ensured union democracy in the state of Florida, saying that if a union drops below 60% membership, and that's certified by a CPA audit, the membership levels, that those public employees are given the right to have an election on the union, and essentially the union card isn't an heirloom. If that membership drops below 60%, they're guaranteed an election, just like we vote for president, governor, state legislature, or Congress. So that's kind of the spectrum of what we're seeing. In a nutshell, there's a lot more that's going on, but that's what we've seen over the last couple of years, both on the left and the right spectrum.
Does anybody have any questions before we move on? All right, thank you.
Thanks very much. Appreciate it, you guys.
Thanks, Bethany. Okay.
So this, you heard from some experts from Lower 48, but it's not just about Lower 48. We've got Alaskan folks who are affected by this as well. So we're going to watch a video now from a local former teacher who's now retired, and she's going to tell her story in her own Alaskan words. So.
My name is Kathy McCullum. I taught in the Matsu Borough School District for 31 years. I mostly taught first grade, some fourth grade, and I really enjoyed my job. I'm currently retired. I decided to opt out of the union mainly because I didn't agree with the policies of NEA. Their political contributions didn't match what my beliefs were, and it just didn't seem right that I had to pay to a group in order to do the job that I really wanted to do. So I decided to look into opting out. Well, for a long time, I was not aware that there was anything I could do to disassociate myself from the union. I thought it was a requirement of my job, which it actually was. But I did find out at some point that I could receive my political portion of the union dues back. So my union dues at that time were about $1,000 a year. I found a form letter online and sent it in to my union president and the school district. And I was able to get back about $385 out of $1,000, which the NEA stated was the political portion of our dues. It was difficult at first because when I asked for help from our union president, he did not respond to my questions. So I had to do a lot of the research myself in order to even find out that this was a possibility to even get my money back, just the small portion of my money back. So I did it, and I was really happy with myself that I was able to figure that part out, and I realized that most teachers didn't have any idea that that was even a possibility. We could get $19 of political action money back from our local teachers union, and a lot of teachers I knew did that, but we didn't realize that we were able to go. There was such a small window for opting out of that political money. But I think it really caused a little bit of a stir because eventually about 10 to 12 teachers in my school had opted out of that political money. And I think it had gotten the attention of the union. So we had representatives from the union that would come to the school and walk around in the morning to talk to teachers about why they had opted out. They told many mistruths or untruth. They told them that they would not have liability insurance or liability coverage if they didn't belong to the teachers union, and that really frightened some of the newer teachers especially. Well, after I started receiving my political money back, I actually was not considered a member of the union anymore. I didn't have any voting privileges, but I still had to pay a good amount of money to the union for bargaining, is what they said. And so I was not happy about that still, but I did feel happy that I was receiving my political money back because I didn't believe in those causes that the NEA supported. And the rest of my job pretty much stayed the same. There was no change to my salary, no change to my benefits. I was happy in my job. And about 2 years before I retired, the Janus decision became final. And so all of us who had opted out of the political money actually became non-members of the union automatically. And so then we didn't have to pay any union dues. None of our benefits or salary changed. Most of us that had done this were so happy that we had done it. We did not receive a lot of retaliation from other teachers or the union. We had a really conservative school overall, so people just got along and everybody was happy about it. Then when I retired, there was no difference to my retirement benefits. There was no change really in my job or how I worked. So you know, I don't think that opting out affects someone's retirement at all. In fact, I don't believe that it affects any portion of their job. You still do the job you want to do, you work hard, and that's what it's all about. If you're a teacher who doesn't agree with the union's policies and support for political activities, you can opt out. And I would say your best route would be to search out a place like Alaska Policy Forum for information, or go to optouttoday.com. That's a really great website. I've directed lots of friends there. It's simple. It's not as scary as you think it is. And if you're still a little worried, reach out to someone who has already opted out if you can find someone. And if you can't, someone like Alaska Policy Forum can help you out with that. It's not as hard or as scary as you think.
Thank you. Kathy is local, and so she has offered to speak with anyone who is interested in talking with her further about her experience. So if you do want to speak with someone locally, she'd be happy to do that. So we're going to have another panel here now, and this information is going to be about how to opt out. So you heard from Jarrett earlier, and Sean is going to join him to walk through how to opt out. Kathy is a teacher, and there are some specific resources for teachers that it would be great if you guys could share for opt-out resources. But just in general, we do have some brochures back there with the My Pay, My Say Alaska information as well. So I'll let you guys kind of walk through that process for folks. Appreciate it.
All right, so me and Sean kind of, we oversee different groups and partner with different groups across the country that have been dealing with this issue. And the easiest way to explain is when the case came out, very quickly we realized a lot of people didn't know what it meant. They didn't know, they had lots of questions. We began fielding thousands of phone calls. And so we set up websites aimed in the different states, some at teachers, some at other public employees, FAQ pages and things like that to just answer the question of what this meant. And it does differ a little bit state by state sometimes, and sometimes even union by union. So Sean, why don't you go ahead and talk about kind of the resources that have been set up and the types of groups that we're talking with.
Yeah, so overall, one of the best resources you can go to is mypaymysay.org, mypaymysay.com. For here in Alaska, as we've mentioned before, you have the website for APF. And there's lots of, you can also, she talked about, and I know Mark has talked about this and Vinnie mentioned this, one of the big barriers for some people to say, well, I don't really want to leave the union, because, especially if you're a teacher, is the liability insurance issue. And so we did a lot of work in California. Right after the decision, we actually were preparing to do some work in California as the decision was pending. And after the Supreme Court came down with the decision, we went to work with educating teachers in California, Southern California in particular. They wouldn't know anything about it, or if they had questions, the unions would probably not be completely forthcoming with what their options were. And so we went about educating them. We would send emails, we did digital advertising, we did phone calls to let people know, and texting to let people know, hey, did you know that you have the right to opt out of your union if you want? You don't have to stay in your union to have your job. And we then followed that up because we realized that opting out of the union is not necessarily, it's not an easy thing. It's not like, think about in politics, somebody knocks on your door, they give you a phone call and they say, hey, I want you to vote for this guy or this woman. Okay, well, that's easy. That's almost meaningless in what it does to impact your life. Who you vote for doesn't matter at all at the moment, right? Now, who ends up getting elected will impact your life, obviously. So you want to pick the right person for your ideals. But the actual act of voting doesn't really change your life, right? Well, if you go to someone and say, hey, I think you should get out of the union, a lot of people say, well, that's That's a big step, because I have friends who are union members. I've been in the union for a long time. I don't know that I want to have the arguments about getting out of the union. I don't know what the process is. It seems really complicated. And so I have described it to people when people say, well, it seems like it'd be pretty easy. You do political stuff, people vote. I'm like, yeah, but it's different. This is more like asking someone to change their religion, right? It's a big deal. And so I have always approached this with some sensitivity to say, I'm not here to bash on unions, because unions have done great things for people for decades. But I do believe in personal freedom. And so our approach has been, here are your options, and you can decide how you want to do it, or whether you do it or not. And we're here to help you with the resources. So a couple of places to go if you're a teacher. From the liability insurance issue, there's an organization called American Association of Educators, or Association of American Educators, and they provide an insurance product that is less than $15 a month. It's AAE.org, and you can sign up and become a member, and it's very easy, and it offers, I think it's $1 million or $2 million in
$1 million.
Liability coverage, and they have a legal team that you can call up at any time to get assistance on any questions you might have, whether it's your job or the opt-out process. And the one thing that I will say is that there's a lot of people who are there to help, between the Alaska Policy Forum, the Mackinac Center, Institute for Justice. There's just a bunch of people who are out there willing to help people find their freedom.
Yeah, and the main website he mentioned is mypaymysay.com. I mean, if you Google kind of how to get out of my membership or teacher union membership, but MyPayMySay, and that one is more broad-based. It's because this is for every government employee, teachers, state employees, police, fire, local government, whatever. And then that has some easy FAQs. It provides forms. It tries to be kind of a little bit more of a national hub. And one of the things there is to get free legal help. So we do get lots of questions through there that we respond to. We have had people come through there who have, where they've said, look, the union's just not processing my form. I've tried to get out. We've had to get a letter from our attorneys. And for the most part, that solves the issue. In a couple of cases, we have had to file lawsuits. We have had one person who we believe the union got him fired because he withdrew from membership. So we are representing him in court over the issue. Because the way to think of the decision is that the court made union membership a constitutional right. So you cannot be discriminated against based on your choice in union membership. But we do know, sometimes that is happening. And on a more personal level, like I said, my parents are public school teachers. My younger sister is a public school teacher. She did withdraw from her union membership based on personal beliefs. She did face a lot of pressure, kind of locally within her school district. And so sometimes that happens. And the big thing with Association of American Educators or other similar groups is kind of finding other people who've gone through the process. And we can't promise everything's going to be smooth going forward. Sometimes, you're taking a moral stand, and moral stands are rarely easy. But you do also have legal rights, and so we do provide free legal resources for people that do need it. So I think we're ready for the next group.
Molden, and first I'd like to thank the Alaska Policy Forum for putting this event together. I think it's extremely important, and I'm happy to participate as somebody who has experienced this firsthand when it comes to choosing to not belong to a public employee union because of the Janus decision. I am not currently a teacher. I retired a couple of years ago, but I taught for 22 years. And I taught in the Anchorage School District at East High School and also North Star Behavioral Hospital, my last 4 years of teaching. I found the process for opting out easy. I was told that what I needed to do was send a letter to the Anchorage Education Association, which I did. And then I also talked to the Human Resources Department at the district and told them that I was opting out. I did not do this at the beginning of the school year. I did it in, I believe, October. And in most cases, I believe that with the school districts, you can opt out at any time. So the union got that information. I made sure that the district was aware that I had sent a letter to the union, and I asked for them to stop subtracting union dues from my paycheck. I was actually quite surprised how the union reacted, or that there was very little reaction from my union when I submitted my letter to remove myself from the rolls. Building rep did visit with me. I explained to them that because of the Janus decision and my frustration with the union's political action, that I did not want to be a member of the union. And so that was about the only reaction I got from the union. My wife, who is a current teacher, went back to teaching full-time and actually didn't join the union at all. And I think it's important for people to understand that there's very little reaction to that from her perspective. No one questions her about that. In fact, she often has conversations with colleagues who would like to do the same thing. And so if anything, I think she is an example for them on what is possible when you choose to opt out. If I was a teacher today considering opting out, I would say do it as quickly as you can. I found there was no real benefit of me being a union member, and in fact really only costs in terms of what was taken out of my salary, the fact that I couldn't negotiate for myself, and that my union was often promoting political activity and candidates with whom I greatly disagreed. I know that there are fears out there about liability, wrongful accusations, things like that, but it's important for teachers to understand that districts have an incentive to protect their teachers legally when there is false accusation. The reason for that is the district is often involved in being sued just like the teacher is. And the reason why the district is always included is because they have the big pockets. So it's really in the district's best interest to protect their teachers and to support them when anything like that happens. Additionally, if you're really concerned about it, you can buy millions of dollars of liability insurance for far less than what it costs you in union dues.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, so Todd and Kathy apologize. I apologize that they're not here. They both wanted to be able to be here in person, but they both had separate trips planned out of state at this time, so we were able to, thanks to Sean and his team, put together these videos so that you guys could hear from their own words. But they're both available and interested in talking to anyone who has more questions about the process, so we'd be happy to connect you with them. Another resource for teachers that I wanted to bring to everyone's attention is teacherfreedom.org. Teacherfreedom.org is a great website for teachers. And so we're going to move into question and answers now. So if all of our experts want to come forward, we're going to allow audience to ask some questions. And I want to get started with the first question if we could. I'd like for someone to give us what you have found are the most common reasons why people leave their unions, why they opt out.
Yeah, so me and Sean running the websites and the campaigns where we've literally taken thousands of phone calls and emails. Not all of those positive, of course. But I would say that for the most part, in issues I have no interest in. So one guy I talked to a week ago, he said, I agree with them on their political candidates, but he was like an NRA member, pro-gun kind of guy, and he just said, why is the teachers union getting involved on gun rights issues? Like, it didn't make sense to him. So that was his reason for withdrawal. So some it's just disagreement on politics. The other are people who are very apolitical. They do not like politics. They don't want to be, they're not Republicans or Democrats. They don't like politics, and they don't want to be associated with a group getting involved in political issues. And I think the third main category are kind of people who are, they really have some local personal issue. The union contracts requires that it's only seniority based, and they don't have any seniority, and so they haven't had a raise in 5 years. The union contract doesn't allow teachers to transfer from one district to another, or they block them from moving to another grade. They like to teach in 4th grade forever, and the contract requires that they go to another grade. So usually like just these personal local issues, and that happens for state employees as well, where they just have kind of these weird provisions in contracts that I don't have an opinion on whether they're good or bad. They just really have some really local personal issue where they felt the union was kind of standing in their way.
All right, other questions? They're here to answer your questions. Yes.
So my concern is not with the liability, but my concern from leaving, and I have opted out of the dues, the political dues before, and I did opt out one time. But I opted back in because I had a principal that was targeting certain people they didn't like. And to basically get rid of ones that didn't agree with certain things. And so I opted back in because I thought I needed that protection. So I guess my question is, that is my fear of not having that support to fight me against my administrator.
Well,
Yeah.
I can answer that question. Most school districts have a liability insurance that covers all the employees. And the union liability insurance does not kick in at all until the school district liability insurance is exhausted. And have you ever read the union liability policy?
No, but I was thinking liability was
Yeah.
like a student accuses you of something, and I was thinking, are you saying it's the same thing?
No, you're
right.
I think I understand what you're talking
Do you
about.
know what
Okay,
I'm-
you're-
just
yeah,
like
okay.
representing me against my
Yeah, so-
supervisor, I guess.
You have a grievance.
You have a grievance.
Yes.
Okay.
So this is the thing that gets a little down in the weeds. I'm trying to go too far. So no matter what in a grievance situation, the union, you still fall under the union collective bargaining agreement, whether you're in the union or not. And there's complicated legal reasons for that, but essentially what the law is that once a workforce is unionized, whether the union represents everybody in that workforce, even non-members. And so if you have a grievance situation, the union is required to still represent you in the grievance. I actually disagree with that. I think that if you opt out, you should be free from that, but that is the law, and Vinnie can go into that a little bit too. But separate from that, we talked about Association of American Educators. That's what they do as well. So it's the liability insurance, and if you had needed an attorney for a grievance situation, they would provide one in order to represent you. Now, like I said, my parents were public school teachers for decades. If there's a situation where a principal is just kind of out to get you and is like, I like the union, or I'm this way politically, or whatever, honestly, that's just something different. That stuff can happen or not happen regardless of union membership, and so it can't really speak to that if they're saying for some reason they want you in a union or not. But it's just the basics. In a grievance situation, the union still has to represent you. Even if you didn't want to take the representation, if you're an AAE member, they would provide an attorney for that. And if you felt like you were being discriminated against them, like they're doing this because you withdrew from the union, our organization, several others, they would represent you for free in that, because it is a constitutional rights issue. Did you want to add anything on the?
Yeah, the unions, they negotiate to have a monopoly, and that's the bottom line. So it's kind of like the old Henry Ford joke: you can have a Model T in any color as long as it's black. If you look at your collective bargaining agreement, almost all the union contracts say, yeah, other employees who are not union members, you can negotiate for anything you want as long as it's not counter to this collective bargaining agreement, and everything is under that collective bargaining agreement. So in exchange for that, and without getting too legalistic, unions have what's known as the duty of fair representation. So if you do get in trouble, they must represent you. Now, I agree with Jarrett, and we actually in the back have model policy saying that, public employees that want to represent themselves, that want to negotiate, like Jarrett was talking about, for things like, well, if I want to move school districts, I don't want to be under the union seniority system. I think you should have that right, and you should be able to fully opt out of the union contract. However, because the way these contracts are structured right now is they get a monopoly, they represent everyone, and because they represent everyone, and they want to have what's known as exclusive representation, if you get in trouble, they have to represent you, because that's the bargain essentially they do to have that power of representing
For the union, but the contract, the actual language of the contract is while they have a duty to represent everyone, they could decline in individual scenarios and say, yeah, we don't think this one's legit. We're not going to intervene in this situation. So is that's even for the dues paying.
Yeah,
they could decline.
Right.
That situation is more of like if a teacher is convicted of sleeping with a student. That's them kind of covering like, we're not going to go in on that. And some unions do and some don't. So they sometimes, but that applies equally to everyone.
Right.
Union
Whether
member,
they're paying dues,
non-union.
Right, even if you're paying dues. So he said that he was told that even if he's paying dues, they could say, sorry, we're not getting involved in that.
But here's the issue. Up until the union says we're not getting involved with that, you can't say, well, I'm just going my own way. I don't want anything to do with the union. Stay away from this grievance. I'm hiring my own attorney, and I want to deal one-on-one with the school administrator or with the police captain or whoever's on the other side of the bargaining table. You actually can't do that, because most collective bargaining agreements say that the union, they have that exclusive representation, they have that monopoly, and they have the right to be present and make sure nothing is counter to the collective bargaining agreement, whether you as a public employee member or not want that or not. That's why we have the workers' choice model legislation saying that no, you should be able to act like the rest of the 88% of workers in the economy and represent yourself if you so choose, but that's not the law right now.
So we'll be forced to be represented by them, even if they don't do the job. But you could pull someone else in and represent you if you needed to. Is that what you're saying?
It's case by case, but bottom line is, yes, if you're under a union contract, the union basically has right of first refusal. And, they have the right to be present. They have
Typically, they would be fine with that. They'd say, oh, you want to have your own attorney? Then, yeah, we've talked to a couple people in those situations.
That's a very good question. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, sorry for going, it's a
Too much in the weeds.
It's a bit in the weeds. I honestly, the analogy isn't quite perfect, but the way I tell people is, what happened in Janus was essentially the Supreme Court, they made union membership a constitutional right. It's like the school district has to treat it as if it was you being a minority or your race or whatever. They cannot treat you differently, whether you're a man or woman, whatever racial group you are, or your union membership. They have to treat everybody the same. The employer cannot think about any of those things. And so if you're discriminating against based on any of those categories, race, gender, union membership, you are going to have a very strong case, and they cannot do that.
Other questions? Really? They answered all the questions that you have? Nothing lingering?
Well, we'll hang around for a little bit too if you want to come up and talk to us personally, but we appreciate,
Yeah, so if you, some of those packets you had back there have our office number, my personal cell number. You're always welcome to reach out. We can put you in touch with these experts and others. Happy to answer any questions. Again, this is not about whether or not you should or shouldn't. That's a personal choice. This is just about you knowing that you have that right. So thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you. Thank you, Bethany.
All right, thank you guys all for being here tonight. Do not forget to like and share. You'll find this on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, and Rumble. all at Politadick, and while we're live at our website at politadick.com, please go and click your support button while you're on our website and help us make more events like this one. We'll be back again tomorrow night at 6 o'clock in the Wasilla area. Place to be determined. Go and register. We'll talk to you all later.